Hi, I'm Max. I work for Kinura LTD and I'm a camera operator and live stream tech. My career started with the purchase of a Canon 750D. It was essentially for photography, really, but I ended up finding that I was pressing record more than I was pressing the shutter button on the camera. Gradually from there, I would film myself saying something and realize, maybe I need to get a better microphone so I can sort of improve the audio. And from there it was, maybe I can edit a couple of them together. So I had to learn to edit as well. And from there it was, maybe I could light myself a bit better. I'm looking a bit gloomy. Yeah, and just gradually picked up sort of all the little bits, really. I did a master's in production. So when uni finished, I was full-time freelance. And then the pandemic hit. I found that more jobs were coming in that involved remote production. So there'd be somebody in the US normally who would direct a shoot. We would essentially live stream whatever we were shooting to them in the US, and they would be on comms with us, telling us what to change, better exposure here, to frame up differently there, that kind of thing. And that was kind of my live streaming introduction. The majority of the live stream stuff we do is, I use the sort of blanket term corporate, but we can sort of do anything, really. We've done productions for YouTube channels, for example. There's a cooking channel. It tends to be a bit chaotic because we've got, 4 different cameras and it's everyone's cooking stuff and the presenters will do stuff off the cuff. So that's a bit different. That's a bit more kind of energizing. The live streaming that I do will have very different team sizes and very different requirements, I guess, from the cameras as well. For anything outside of our office, we tend to use XF605s, just because they're our kind of workhorse camera. They're nice and light and easy to carry, they do everything. It's kind of the top camcorder that I've ever filmed on. What we have in our studio are 3 Canon CRN500s. These PTZ cameras that we pop on little stands and can get like 3 different angles of whatever we're filming. Once you've got them set up and once you've gone through and kind of got the settings how you want them to be, provided nothing changes in the actual studio setting, they're ready to go. All this can be controlled on the RC IP100 controller. The nice thing about this is that it's completely customizable. You can pre-program basically any button on it to do whatever you like. I like to have everything related to exposure just there and ready for me. If on our LED screen they pop up a different graphic, I might need to quite quickly change the different exposure settings. For example, if a graphic they have is particularly dark compared to a particularly bright one before, I'll need to just quickly adjust things. And it's really nice to have that pre-programmed in so I can sit down beforehand when the client's not there and there is no pressure and basically program everything in and work it out beforehand, which is one of the biggest advantages of the controller with live streaming, because live streaming, you don't have time to fix things when you're actually live because the client's going to get very upset with you if you're sitting there playing with everything. So you can have everything right there, and if they want to change, you can just hit a button and it happens immediately. The PTZs have a really nice remote capability over NDI network. The ways in which this is useful for us is we sort of do a mini remote situation in our studio where we sit in a booth away from the actual shooting space and we can close the door. We're not going to be faffing around in the studio, getting in the way when people are wanting to present. And it makes things easier for the presenter because the less people in the room, the better, I think. Another benefit of the PTZs is you can control them via the Canon remote camera control app. One major benefit of the remote camera control app is that you can have all the settings laid out there in front of you and see all the cameras simultaneously. You can go on all the cameras at once, select them all at once and change settings for all of the cameras. So for example, for ours, it would be all 3. You can change them simultaneously. So you don't need to worry about, did I get 25 frames for this camera? No, you've changed them all at once. So you know all 3 of them in our case are all going to be 25 frames. And you can do that with things like iris as well. You can do that with shutter speed, and you can do that for pretty much as many cameras as you like. In theory, there's no limit as to how far away you can be physically, provided you can access the IP of the cameras. Then you can sit wherever you like and pop the camera app up and adjust settings from there. The program we normally use to operate the actual live stream itself will be vMix. And while vMix is open, it's really handy to have the controller there because I don't need to open up anything else to access the cameras, and I'll be able to see them moving in the previews or in the little tabs at the bottom to see what I'm moving and how it's working. However, You can program the PTZs in, especially with movements and presets, through vMix itself, which is really handy because then that comes in as an input. So you can click that input and the camera will just move to wherever it needs to be instantly. It's really quite nifty. You can see it if somebody previews a camera in that particular NDI input, it will just move to wherever it needs to be in the preview. I can also adjust it then with the control stick if I need to. It's really, really handy having that functionality with vMix and not having to open and close different programs while you're live streaming, which I think any tech will tell you is something you do not want to be doing. In terms of placement of the cameras, I normally like to have close-up cameras slightly above the eye line. It just makes people's faces look a bit nicer to me. And then the wide tends to be a tiny bit lower just to accommodate for the way our LED screen is positioned. For audio, which is the missing piece of the puzzle, I guess, we will typically lapel mic everybody and have that feed through to our audio control desk in the studio space. If we've got Zoom presenters coming in, we do require things like a mix minus of audio. That can get a bit more complicated, might require an audio engineer. But if not, if it's just a studio space, we really only need me and Serge, so it's a lot simpler. Once we've got the production up and running, the final component is to actually get it out there so people can see what we're streaming. We'll just RTMP the stream out to a nice, easy player. We can do more complicated things like constructing a player for our clients. That's something we do fairly often, typically for AGMs, that kind of thing. So if you came to me and said, hey, I've got my first live stream, I'm nervous, like, how's it gonna go? What would I recommend to make it go a lot smoother? I'd say preparation is probably the #1 thing. You want everything to be as perfect as it can be long before the live stream starts. So then if there's anything that you want to change, you can change it in advance. It's the same with things like assets. The earlier we get things, the better everything's going to go. The earlier you can be sure that everything's going to work fine, the better you're going to feel, and the more creative you can be in the actual live streaming setting, and the more fun you're going to have, which is, you know, ideally what you want to be doing if you're working in something all the time, is you want to be having at least some fun with it, which is something you can do if you feel prepared. Yes. My #1 tip for the CRN 500 is get to know everything it can do long before you ever go live, because you don't want to miss out on a potential setting that could help you or a customizable feature that might make your job easier once you actually go live. So get to know the camera as much as possible pre-live. One benefit of combining the Canon PTZs with the Canon controller is the fact that you can create your own presets. Work with your presets to have as many possible situations covered as possible. So in vMix, that would involve creating NDI inputs, and create NDI inputs that you don't think you'll even need, because you never know, you might end up needing them eventually. For me personally, an example when I might want to use a preset is if a client is doing a product demonstration. So one preset might be them speaking to camera, and then the next preset would be a bit closer and a bit shallower focus on them demonstrating a product with their hands, for example. That can be really helpful to be able to switch between them very quickly in a live scenario. Using the Canon PTZs, you also want to think about your workflow and what you're going to actually use to control these cameras. You might want to use the RCI P100 controller, or you might want to use presets in vMix, or you might want to use the RCCA on a desktop. All these different methods of control are going to serve different purposes, and you want to work out which one's right for you, again, well in advance of you actually going live, to work out which one works best for you. One thing you want to pair the CRN 500 with is the RCCA, which is the camera control app, which allows you to change basically any setting you change on an ordinary camera, but from the comfort of a desktop. One advantage of that is, rather than going around to every individual camera and changing, say, the iris, the gain, the shutter speed one by one and having to remember everything that you're doing, you can do it all across the board all at once. So with the Canon PTZs, you should also be aware of what environment you're going to take them into. You could run them off SDI and you could run them off power and all this sort of stuff, but it might be beneficial to think about whether you can run them off NDI or potentially any other IP protocol that you might be happening to use, because they can run off just a single cable, a single Cat5 if you do it that way, and that can be a lot more streamlined in terms of your workflow. I really hope these tips have helped you as you plan your next live stream or remote production.